The morning sorting cycle at the New Orleans Processing and Distribution Center began at 0347 hours on a Tuesday in late September, consistent with scheduled operations for standard metropolitan area route processing. Incoming mail volume registered at 94.2% of projected weekday average, arriving via air transport from Memphis, ground relay from Baton Rouge, and local collection from 118 blue collection boxes serviced during the previous evening's pickup cycle. Optical character readers processed address blocks at standard efficiency rates. Letter mail moved through automated sorting equipment without mechanical interruption. Flats and irregulars passed through manual sort stations where clerks assigned items to carrier route sequences based on ZIP+4 codes and delivery point encoding. By 0612 hours, first stage sorting had separated inbound mail into 87 carrier route designations corresponding to residential zones, commercial districts, and mixed-use areas across Orleans Parish. No equipment malfunctions were logged. No supervisory alerts were issued. Volume did not exceed handling capacity. The system accepted what arrived and prepared it for the next operational phase, which involved transferring sorted mail to staging areas where route carriers would collect assigned loads, conduct secondary casing at their respective stations, and begin street delivery according to established route timing standards that assumed average walking speed, average dwell time per delivery point, and average return to station intervals. Between 0630 and 0745 hours, 81 of 87 scheduled carriers reported to their assigned stations across 6 postal facilities in the metropolitan service area. Absence rate measured 6.9%, slightly above the district's rolling 30-day average of 5.1%, but within operational tolerance as defined by contingency staffing models that anticipated variability through sick leave, annual leave, and unforeseen personal circumstances. Carriers who reported conducted pre-delivery preparation, a process involving retrieval of sorted mail from staging bins, secondary sequencing of items into precise delivery order matching their walking or driving route, bundling of parcels, and loading of delivery vehicles or satchels. This phase, termed casing time, typically required between 47 and 93 minutes depending on route complexity, mail volume for that specific day, and carrier experience level. On this particular morning, casing time extended beyond upper tolerance limits for 34 routes. Delays were attributed to higher than usual parcel counts in certain zones, incomplete pre-sorting from the distribution center requiring additional manual sequencing, and staffing gaps that necessitated route consolidation, where one carrier assumed responsibility for portions of an absent colleague's assignment in addition to their own. By 0830 hours, when initial departure targets indicated that 70% of routes should have begun street delivery, actual departure rate stood at 41%, a gap that would compress the available window for route completion before mandatory return times. Street delivery operations in New Orleans followed route structures established through time motion studies that calculated optimal paths through neighborhood grids, accounting for block length, delivery density, vehicle parking locations, and walking distances between curbside stops and individual delivery points. Standard routes were designed to be completed within a 6 to 8 hour window, inclusive of travel time, delivery actions, and brief rest intervals. On this date, carriers departing between 0830 and 0945 hours encountered conditions that incrementally extended delivery duration beyond design parameters. Parcel volume required additional trips between vehicles and doorsteps. Address irregularities necessitated extra verification steps. Construction detours rerouted carriers away from optimal paths. Individually, these factors added seconds or minutes to specific stops. Cumulatively, across hundreds of delivery points per route, they compressed the time available for completing all assigned stops before the operational day concluded. By 1130 hours, carriers on 29 routes had completed fewer than 40% of their delivery points, a pace that, if maintained linearly, would require 10 to 11 hours to finish, exceeding both the designed route duration and the practical limits of a single work shift. No individual carrier reported an obstacle significant enough to warrant supervisory intervention. Each delay was minor, routine, absorbable within normal operational variation. The aggregation of minor delays, however, produced a throughput reduction that began to interact with fixed time constraints. Postal operational doctrine divides the delivery day into periods governed by scheduling assumptions that prioritize certain mail classes and impose return deadlines to ensure vehicle availability for subsequent collection cycles. Priority mail and express mail items carry service commitments that require delivery within specific timeframes. First-class mail follows timeliness standards less rigid than express products but more stringent than bulk advertising mail. Carriers are instructed to complete routes fully when possible, but when time constraints emerge, they follow guidance prioritizing express and priority items, followed by accountable mail requiring signatures, then remaining first-class volume. On this date, as the midday period progressed and it became evident that full route completion within standard hours was increasingly unlikely, carriers began implementing partial delivery strategies. Express items were delivered first, priority parcels received next attention. First-class letters were delivered to the extent time permitted. Lower priority bulk mail and unaddressed advertising circulars were deferred. By 1400 hours, supervisors at 4 stations received informal reports from carriers indicating that complete route coverage would not occur. These reports did not trigger formal incident protocols because partial delivery, while undesirable, fell within the spectrum of operational variance that management systems were designed to accommodate through next-day redistribution of undelivered items. The mail that remained undelivered did not disappear. It returned to stations, was resorted, and was prepared for inclusion in the following day's delivery cycle, adding incremental volume to an already established baseline. The accumulation of undelivered mail introduced a feedback effect into the operational sequence. Mail volume for the following day consisted of newly arrived items plus the residual from incomplete prior day routes. When Wednesday's sorting cycle began at 03:47 hours, incoming volume measured at expected levels, but when combined with deferred items from Tuesday, total mail requiring delivery increased by approximately 11% in affected zones. Carrier casing time extended accordingly. Departure schedules slipped. Street delivery hours compressed. The same minor delays that had characterized Tuesday's operations persisted on Wednesday: parcel handling, address verification, route deviations, but now operated against a higher volume baseline and a delivery window already reduced by delayed departures. By Wednesday afternoon, 38 routes reported incomplete delivery, a higher count than the previous day. Undelivered mail from Wednesday joined residual from Tuesday, and both were folded into Thursday's workload. The cycle repeated. Each day's partial completion added to the next day's input. Volume grew not because more mail entered the system from external sources, but because the system's output rate had fallen below its input rate, causing inventory to accumulate within the operational pipeline. Carriers worked standard hours. Facilities operated on schedule. No equipment failed, yet the gap between what needed to be delivered and what could be delivered within available time widened incrementally, day by day, until the backlog reached a level where normal daily operations could no longer reduce it. Operational data from the 5-day period beginning with the initial Tuesday showed that daily mail input into the New Orleans service area remained statistically consistent with historical averages, varying by no more than 3.7% above or below the rolling 90-day mean. The variable that changed was not input, but throughput, the percentage of staged mail successfully delivered to its final destination within the designated service day. On the initial Tuesday, throughput measured 73%, on Wednesday, 68%, Thursday, 64%, Friday, 62%, Saturday, a partial service day with reduced route hours, achieved 59%. The decline was gradual, nonlinear, and insufficient on any single day to trigger emergency intervention protocols, which were calibrated to detect sudden disruptions, such as weather events, equipment failures, or staffing shortages exceeding 15%. What occurred instead was a drift below operational equilibrium, a state in which daily delivery capacity no longer matched daily delivery requirement. The mail that remained undelivered each day did not vanish. It was scanned, logged, and held in staging areas. Tracking systems updated to reflect processing milestones, arrival at facility, sorting complete, out for delivery, but final delivery confirmation did not occur. Recipients checking tracking information saw movement through the system but no completion. Businesses awaiting invoices, payments, or contractual documents experienced delays that were not traumatic enough to prompt immediate action, but were sufficient to introduce friction into routine transactions. The failure was not visible in the form of abandoned trucks or closed facilities. It was visible only in the widening gap between expected delivery dates and actual delivery dates, a gap measured in days rather than hours. District management became aware of the throughput degradation on Thursday afternoon when weekly performance metrics, compiled from scanning data across all routes, indicated that on-time delivery rates had fallen below the lower control limit established by service performance standards. Initial analysis focused on identifying discrete causes, weather disruptions, vehicle breakdowns, workforce shortages, but none of these factors appeared in sufficient magnitude to explain the observed decline. Weather records showed no significant precipitation or temperature extremes. Fleet maintenance logs reported normal mechanical reliability. Staffing absence rates, while slightly elevated, remained within the range that contingency plans were designed to handle. The analysis then shifted to examining cumulative effects. Route timing studies were reviewed. Parcel volume trends were analyzed. Casing duration data was aggregated. A pattern emerged. Small extensions in multiple operational phases, none individually significant, had combined to push total route duration beyond the time available within a standard work shift. The solution space involved either reducing the time required per route or increasing the time available per carrier. Reducing route time required either decreasing mail volume, which was not controllable at the local level, or increasing delivery speed, which had limited room for improvement given that carriers were already operating at or near established pace standards. Increasing available time required either extending work shifts, which involved overtime costs and labor agreement constraints, or adding carriers, which required personnel availability that did not exist in the short term. Both approaches required resources or approvals that could not be mobilized immediately. A temporary operational adjustment was implemented beginning the following Monday. Overtime hours were authorized for carriers willing to extend their shifts beyond standard 8-hour periods, allowing routes to be completed more fully even when casing and delivery phases ran longer than planned. Additional casual employees, part-time workers used to supplement permanent staff during peak periods, were brought in to assist with sorting and casing tasks, reducing the workload burden on route carriers and accelerating departure times. Supervisors redistributed routes to balance workload more evenly across available personnel, ensuring that no single carrier bore a disproportionate share of accumulated backlog. These measures increased labor costs and required coordination across multiple stations, but they succeeded in raising daily throughput back toward equilibrium. By the end of the second week following the initial Tuesday, on-time delivery rates had recovered to 89%, still below the target standard of 95%, but sufficiently improved to halt further backlog accumulation. Mail that had been deferred during the degradation period was gradually cleared from staging areas and delivered to recipients, though the delays meant that some items arrived 5 to 9 days after their initial processing date. No formal public communication was issued regarding the service disruption because the disruption did not meet the threshold criteria for customer notification, which required either complete service suspension or delays affecting a majority of delivery points for more than 3 consecutive days. Most recipients experienced delays without understanding their systemic origin, attributing late delivery to the general variability they had come to expect from postal service. An internal operational review was conducted in the weeks following the throughput recovery. The review examined planning assumptions embedded in route design models, staffing level calculations, and performance monitoring systems. Route timing standards were found to be based on data collected during periods of lower parcel volume than currently experienced, a shift driven by the growth of e-commerce and corresponding decline in letter mail. The models assumed a mail mix weighted more heavily toward letters and flats, which required less handling time per item than parcels. As parcel volume increased without corresponding adjustment to route time allocations, the cumulative handling duration per route extended beyond designed parameters. Staffing models were based on historical absence rates that had been calculated during periods of lower workforce turnover and higher employee retention. Recent increases in turnover, driven by wage competition from other sectors and changes in workforce demographics, had elevated absence rates beyond the levels used in planning calculations, reducing the number of carriers available on any given day and increasing the frequency with which routes needed to be consolidated. Performance monitoring systems were configured to detect acute failures, complete route non-delivery, missed express commitments, scanning gaps, but were less sensitive to gradual throughput erosion, the slow drift below target that had characterized the initial degradation period. The review recommended updates to route timing models to reflect current mail mix, revision of staffing buffers to account for observed absence trends, and enhancement of monitoring dashboards to provide earlier warning of throughput decline before backlog accumulation reached operationally disruptive levels. Documentation generated during and after the event included daily route completion reports, overtime authorization records, casual employee deployment schedules, backlog inventory logs, and service performance variance analyses. These records were filed in district operational archives and summarized in quarterly performance reviews submitted to regional management. The event was classified as a temporary service degradation attributable to confluence of minor operational variances rather than as a failure of primary systems or infrastructure. Recommendations from the internal review were incorporated into planning guidance for the subsequent fiscal year. Route timing standards were adjusted upward by an average of 12 minutes per route to accommodate increased parcel handling requirements. Staffing targets were increased by 4.3% to provide additional buffer against absence-related route consolidation. Monitoring thresholds were recalibrated to trigger alerts when daily throughput fell below 92% for 2 consecutive days, rather than the previous threshold of 88% for 3 consecutive days. No changes were made to physical infrastructure, delivery vehicles, or sorting equipment, as the review determined that the degradation resulted from duration assumptions rather than capacity limits. The mail system in New Orleans resumed normal operations. Delivery completion rates stabilized within target ranges. The 5-day period during which mail continued to move through facilities but did not reach final destinations became a reference case in operational planning discussions, cited in training materials as an example of how systems designed with narrow operational margins can experience functional interruption not through component failure but through the accumulation of small deviations from baseline assumptions occurring simultaneously across multiple process steps.